And just to finish up here, to re-emphasize that the prokaryotes are really important in breaking down organic wastes and dead organisms. Here's my little video of the poor little fox. And of course, there are flies and beetles and scavengers that would take advantage of this biological material once the fox is dead. But the prokaryotes, the bacteria, really do that final breakdown of the organic material and release organic nutrients, chemicals back into the environment, like into the soil, so that those materials are available for other organisms to utilize. So rotting dead things might be gross, but the prokaryotes serve a really important ecological purpose or role or function or job in breaking down that organic material so that the organic material, molecules, and inorganic chemicals can be made available to other things. So prokaryotes also have been put to work by people. Bioremediation is the use of biological organisms to remove pollutants from the water, air, and or soil. And this is used on a massive scale with our wastewater to remove the organic contaminants, to purify the water. And what's released is essentially clean water that's actually in most cases drinkable. So again, one example is the decomposers that treat our sewage. So the raw sewage goes in and it's filtered of the large materials, stuff that won't decompose. Like, if you can imagine, I don't know, a marble gets flushed down the toilet, a marble is not going to decompose. So the solid waste material is removed. But the organic waste is put through a special bioremediation tanks, and the prokaryotes and fungus in there help break down the organic material, and they utilize organic material for their nutrients and chemical needs. And the water that leaves through a multi-step process of bioremediation, the water that leaves is actually drinkable in many cases. It's not really used for that, though. It's used for other purposes like watering yards and those sorts of non-drinkable water uses. Or it's just simply released back into the environment, into rivers or streams or creeks, where that water is now safe and won't hurt the environment. So again, bioremediation is also important in cleaning up toxic wastes and toxic chemical spills that occur in nature, in soil or water, through industrial processes or industrial accidents. And in the environment, there's often prokaryotes around that would help degrade through natural processes pollutants such as oils or solvents, chemicals, and other pesticides. But often their work is slow, in the sense that if it's a big spill or a big release of some of these materials in water or soil, what environmental workers will do is they'll use methods like applying chemicals to break down the larger materials, or even applying some of the prokaryotes to help speed up the activity. Okay? So bioremediation also works on land to help heal or repair soil that's been degraded through pollution or pesticide chemical use. And through bioremediation efforts, terrestrial habitats, right, land habitats, can be restored to a much healthier situation. So let's look at the two main branches of prokaryotes and how they evolved. These are the bacteria and the archaea. So what we have here on the left is a evolutionary family tree, also called a phylogeny, with the earliest living organisms, right, the first living cells. And there's an evolutionary event here that led to the living bacteria of today, which belong into the domain bacteria. Then later on, another prokaryotic group evolved, the domain Archaea. Bacteria and Archaea are both prokaryotic groups. No nucleus, relatively simple cells, and only single-celled organisms. And then later on, the domain Eukarya evolved. So eukaryotic organisms with nucleated cells, many membrane-bound organelles. And from the domain Eukarya, we have the kingdoms Animalia, fungi, Plantae, the plants, and this big group that we can call incorrectly the kingdom Protista, but just the Protists, multiple kingdoms in there, and the taxonomic organization of the Protists is still being done. Okay, so with molecular genetics, biologists have identified the two major branches of the prokaryotic evolutionary events, the bacteria and the archaea. And again, life is organized into, as far as we know, 3 domains: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. So archaea are very abundant in many habitats, and they often live or are abundant in extreme environments where few other organisms can live, even where some bacteria cannot live. So many of the archaea are what we call extremophiles. They are able to handle extreme environments. So the thermophiles can live in very hot water, even boiling. Halophiles can live in very salty environments. Like in Utah, there's the Great Salt Lake, or the Dead Sea in the Middle East, or in seawater evaporating ponds, which are fairly common in the Bay Area, around San Francisco Bay. And these really salty environments, a type of archaea can be found there that are called the halophiles, right? Archaea that can handle extremely salty environments. So again, we tend to call these extreme archaea in the sense that the archaea that can live in extreme environments, we call them extremophiles. Methanogens is a group of anaerobic organisms, bacteria, usually, that can live in anaerobic environments, so environments that oxygen is not readily available, and through their metabolic processes, they release methane gas, CH4, whether it's in nature. This is a picture of a frozen over pond, but in the soil underneath, there are methanogens under the water, right, in the soil and the mud, and they're able to break down hydrogen gas and utilize it as energy and release methane as a gas, and that's what you see bubbling up. So the methane here is kind of trapped in the ice as the lake froze over. So that's an anaerobic environment right at the bottom of the lake. No oxygen is readily available. Or in dumps and buried down in the soil are methanogens that are breaking down organic material, releasing methane, or within things like cows that eat grasses, and the methanogens help break down the grass to provide nutrients for themselves, but also for the cattle, the cow, or other grass-eating animals like cows, horses, sheep, goats, those sorts of things. And then the methane that's released by the methanogens within the animal gets released by the animal then through burping or farting. So they can be, these methanogens are abundant in the mud of lakes and swamps. Municipalities will use the released methane from dumps and can use it for energy. They can harness that released methane gas. And again, methanogens are found in the digestive tract of many animals that consume plant matter. Now, on the negative side, some bacteria are pathogenic. That means they can cause disease. So these are disease-causing organisms. So most of the pathogenic bacteria are harmful because they produce exotoxins or endotoxins, which are poisonous to often the host organism, like a human. So sanitation is usually the most effective way to prevent bacterial disease and actually many diseases. So the advice of washing your hands is just with soap and water is a very effective way of keeping yourself free and preventing pathogens from causing diseases in us. So cholera, the plague, for example, were caused or are caused by this pathogens, disease-causing bacteria. So antibiotics, modern medicine, right, can cure many bacterial diseases. But however, the wide use of antibiotics has pushed the evolution of these organisms through, in a way, artificial natural selection to increase antibiotic resistance in many of these pathogens. So we're finding pathogens that are resistant to antibiotics that used to kill them in the past, but now resistant strains or populations have popped up. So that means more or different antibiotics are required to deal with these pathogens. So it's kind of a evolutionary arms race between these pathogens and the antibiotics that modern medicine uses to control them. A little bit on Lyme disease, and how education is important. So education is a defense against bacterial disease. Good sanitation, washing your hands, nowadays wearing a mask in public. So Lyme disease is caused by a spirochete bacterium, kind of a type of spiral bacterium that is carried within ticks. So the tick is what's called a transfer agent, or what's often referred to as a vector. Right? The disease-causing pathogen is a bacterium that's carried by the vector, which is a tick, and then the tick can bite a human and transfer the disease that way. So it usually starts as a red rash, bullseye shape at the site of the bite, and antibiotics can cure the disease if given within a month of the exposure. So again, education in the sense of knowing that, hey, I think I got bit by a tick. There's a little red swelling mark, shape of a bullseye. Let me go see the doctor before it looks like this. And as soon as possible, definitely within a month. If untreated, the Lyme disease can cause a number of problems. Arthritis, problems with your joints, problems with your cardiovascular system, heart disease, and even attack the nervous system. So Lyme disease, if untreated, is very damaging, but readily and easily treatable. Okay, let's move on to the protists. So these are within the domain Eukarya. And the first eukaryotic organisms to appear in Earth history were the protists. So the fossil record indicates that the first eukaryotes evolved about 2 billion years ago from a prokaryotic ancestor. So the way this occurred was there was an ancestral prokaryotic organism that was able to ingest the ancestor, also a prokaryotic ancestor of mitochondria, and also ingest a prokaryotic ancestor of the chloroplast. Now this might not have happened, and probably did not happen within the same host, but this is just showing you how the current chloroplasts for photosynthesis and mitochondria for aerobic respiration came into existence, right? Engulfing of a heterotrophic prokaryote, meaning it could utilize oxygen through cellular respiration to harness energy, was ingested, and instead of consumed and eaten, it lived in symbiosis with the host. A photosynthetic prokaryotic organism that can photosynthesize, harness sunlight energy, was ingested by an ancestral prokaryotic host, and instead of digesting that internally and using it for energy, it also was able to live in association, symbiosis with the host. Further development of that ancestral host, complete nucleus, and other organelles, in addition to now the mitochondria and the chloroplast. That was the advent of the first eukaryotic organisms, first eukaryotic cells. And the first ones were Protists.